I'm honored to be here today to represent the lineage of my father's family who came to America from Aleppo, Syria in the early 1900s. I plan to work on the lineage of my mother's side of the family next, and hope to share that with you at another time. The Ancona family dates back to the 13th century, to Jacob D. Ancona, son of Solomon. The Anconas came from a town in Italy called Ancona, which is where they got their name. They more than likely migrated from Syria or the Middle East to Italy prior to the 13th century. After living there for many years, they migrated to Syria in the 1700s and lived there for about 200 years before making their way to America in the early 1900s. The Ancona family held dual Italian and Syrian citizenship, as did other community members that came from countries like Italy and France. These Syrian Sephardic Jews were nicknamed Frangis and were not perceived as the typical provincial Syrians. Further, they apparently had additional protection under their citizenship of their country of origin of the laws and how it applied to Jews in Syria. At the advent of the 20th century, the winds of migration for the masses were sweeping through Europe and the Middle East. At the same time, Syria was feeling the economic strain that the opening of the Suez Canal in the late 1860s put on the region. With declining economic prospects and the Syrian government initiating a new mandatory conscription to the army for the Jews whom held dhimmi status, all of this created an incentive to make the sacrifice of migrating to a new country with a new language and a new culture. Interestingly enough, the first Syrian Jews who came to America in the very early 1900s came with the idea that they would make some money in America and go back to Syria. But that quickly changed when they realized what the opportunities were like in America. For many, this migration did not happen with whole families coming at one time. It was commonplace for the sons or the husband to first come and get settled and economically started before being able to even afford having the rest of the family come. This is my great-grandmother, Esther Ancona. Esther Ancona Shamah's family held dual Italian and Syrian citizenship, and they were able to freely move about from country to country more easily than their Syrian counterparts. It was told to me by my great-uncle Danny Shamah that the family went to Cyprus for a number of years during World War I, presumptuously for safety. Esther attended high school in Cyprus where she learned the French language among other subjects. From what I understand, she spoke a number of languages. Esther was also very proficient in playing the oud, an Arabic instrument similar to the lute. Here is Esther playing the oud in Cyprus. Esther came to America with 8 brothers and sisters and her father in 1921. For some reason, the manifests indicate that the family split up on 2 separate ships within days of each other before reuniting in New York. Esther's youngest brother, age 5, arrived at Ellis Island with the family, and as the story goes, he had some sort of parasite in his head. Because of this, they had to leave him behind at Ellis Island while they went to start their life in America. He soon died, and they found out 3 days later. In America, Esther met her husband, Abraham Shamah, my great-grandfather. Abraham, an only child, left Aleppo, Syria with his mother, Sarah Shamah. They resided in Huanjo, Peru for about 6 months before receiving the proper paperwork that would allow them into America, which they finally got in August of 1921. These are their Peruvian passports. Here is the visa that granted them passage into America from Lima, Peru on August 8th of 1921. The two came to America in hope for a better life, and they settled in Brooklyn with many of the other Syrian immigrants at the time. This is an image of Abraham Shamah next to his mother Sarah Shamah, along with the manifests from Ellis Island and the ship that they traveled on. Although we are clear that Abraham came from Syria, this document says that he was a British subject, leading me to believe that he too held dual citizenship for some sort of rights invoked on him by the United Kingdom. This was indicated to me by his 2 living children, Aunt Violet and Uncle Danny. Abraham and Esther got married in 1926 in Brooklyn. During the war, Abraham worked as a ship riveter at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. After the war, he opened up a clothing store in Atlantic City, and then a contracting business that converted heating systems from coal to oil. He died at the young age of 55 years old from a heart attack. These are their naturalization documents, which took them many years to receive. Abraham received his papers in 1944, and then he was able to apply for his wife, and she got her papers in 1957 after his death. Abraham and Esther had many children, one of which my grandfather, Joseph Shamah, whom I'm named after. Joseph married Hannah, or Ann Hittery, and her father and mother migrated from Aleppo, Syria, along with their families. Ann's father, Jacob, or Jack Hittery, came when he was about 8 years of age. He came to America with his father and other brothers and sisters. Here's Jacob's passport, issued in 1917. This is an image of the Hittery family taken in about 1950 in America. The bottom left is Mary Kish. The bottom right is Jacob Hittery. And the middle center is my grandmother Anne. Jacob's father, Rabbi Moses Hittery, taught the young boys in the Talmud Torah. He was a very fine teacher, having known to remove his students' shoes in order to keep them seated. He would devote many hours after school to helping the kids. Being a rabbi, however, didn't bring him too much money, so he decided to start cutting hair to get some extra money. Whoever couldn't afford it, he would let it slide and cut their hair anyway. I'm also fortunate to be one of the students of his great-grandson, Rabbi Moses Hittery, son of Bert and Lisa Hittery, who teaches at Hillel Yeshiva today. He also had another great-grandson named Rabbi Ricky Hittery, son of David and Amy Hittery, who is very well known. Once Jacob graduated the 8th grade, he came out of school to begin working because the family needed money. While the principal was against this, his father, Rabbi Moses Hittery, told the principal, we need money. And so he ended his formal education and took a job with a businessman who needed someone he could trust and could read English and write English fluently. Jack Hittery went on to starting a business initially with Mr. Charlie Maney and Mr. Husney, selling textile goods in a retail store. Jacob was very smart, and his intelligence and good family name that went back generations landed him this job. Later, they had the idea of importing from the Far East, and so the company called Chinese Linen was born. Jacob demonstrated the sacrifice that the men had to make at the time to make a living, as he spent countless months and sometimes over a year on each trip to China, going from city to city to find merchandise. The men would even sell things on consignment to new Syrian immigrants, and this allowed many people to get started without having a lot of money. There are countless stories of Jack and his children extending credit to other community members and immigrants with no collateral and based solely on their names. Jacob's wife, Mary Kish, came to America as a young girl at about the same time as him. However, when she arrived, she had an eye infection of some sort and was required to stay behind in Ellis Island for about 2 weeks. Being alone in Ellis Island was miserable, and she had no comfort of home. But eventually there were some people who spoke Arabic, and she was able to communicate with them from time to time. This was indicated to me by her son, David Hittery. After 2 weeks of being there, she was able to come to New York and be with the family. Today, The Shamah and Kona families and the Hittery Kish families extend to over 100 family members, from children to grandchildren and down to great-great-grandchildren, all of whom built productive and successful lives, giving back to their communities wherever they live. To leave off, oftentimes during Friday night dinner, when my family is sitting in the dining room around the beautiful spread of food and crystal glasses, my father will say that we are sitting at this table in this house purely because of what your ancestors did for you. By doing this research process and learning about how they lived and what they went through, I now understand what my father meant. Thank you.
Wow.